The goal for each podcast episode is for us to be honest, open, and transparent. While conversations do include mental health, this show does not replace support from a licensed mental health professional. If you feel triggered by any of these conversations, please feel free to take a break from the episode and check in with your support system.
When they reach out to you, do not discount their feelings. Listen, and then if you cannot help them, then direct them to the place that they can, but the worst thing that we can do is discount a person's feelings.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Learn the Lies of Podcast. You are tuned into episode number 40, and I'm your host, Abraham Scully. You are tuned into the podcast for young adults and leaders in education wanting to learn how to create safe spaces for honest dialogue about mental health. And this episode I'm specifically excited about because we have a guest who is going to come on and share her story and also dive into the ins and outs around grief, loss, and specifically, how do we navigate the holiday blues? For so many people, the holidays bring joy, satisfaction, fulfillment, happiness. But there are so many people, especially because of COVID, who have lost loved ones, who have lost family members, friends. And there are also people who are battling mental illness. And the holidays can be a very challenging time for those who are impacted by these things. So I decided to bring on a guest, a friend, and we are going to dive in this conversation with Lynette Jackson. She is the founder and CEO of Roar Media Group, a multi-marketing company that has worked with multi-million-dollar churches, small businesses, and grassroots ministries. Lynette has founded Vision Publishing Group, a publishing company that develops the vision of new authors. She's also the author of Hollow, When Everything That Means Anything is Taken Away. I'm also excited to announce that she is a member of our speakers team at Speaks to Inspire. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you all Lynette Jackson. Hey, Lynette.
Hey there, Abraham. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better now that I get to see you and chat with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining the podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I'd love to start off by giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself. And I'd love for you to take the lens of you talking about mental health, you being a mental health advocate, and your passion behind this work that you've done. We're going to have an opportunity to dive into your book a little bit later in the conversation. But if you can, just briefly introduce yourself to our audience.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be able to kind of always talk to you about mental health and how we can help eradicate the stigma behind it. So my name is Lynette Jackson, and I am the owner of Roar Media Group. And Roar is a digital marketing company that helps its clients speak out loud in the marketplace. And we do this with graphics, web development, strategic plans, voiceovers, videos, just a variety of visuals to help people speak out loud in the marketplace. And I mainly do it for small businesses, nonprofits, churches, and ministries. And so I just have the crazy opportunity to just really help a lot of people in the nonprofit space and churches to really develop their strategy, their marketing, and small businesses to help them speak out loud. When I started Roar, I wasn't sure. I actually got laid off when I started Roar, and I didn't know what to do. I was double digits. I was that speed limit, 55 years of age when I got laid off. And I'm like, what am I going to do? But I had all the skills working for prior television companies like Turner Broadcasting, Weather Channel, Cox Media Group. And I had all this TV experience, and I decided, you know what? It's time for me to take this and kind of, roll it all up and start my own company, Roar Media Group. And we started in 2017. We've been going strong ever since. And it has helped me to do what I love the most besides marketing and digital marketing, but it has helped me to be in the nonprofit space, helping people to understand about mental health and to really eradicate the stigma behind it. Really passionate about that.
I love it. And you invited me on your podcast, Speak
Mm-hmm.
Out Loud, not too long ago. And just to hear or first of all, have the opportunity to share my story, but be able to also hear that you have a story.
Yeah.
I think when we, and for those, who get to see this show, they get to look at your beautiful face. And for
Oh.
those of us who oftentimes we have ourselves, we look good, we put ourselves together. Sometimes it's difficult to see that those of us who are strong also struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an opportunity to hear your story, and I think from listening to what you have gone through, it has allowed me to feel even more connected to you,
Mm-hmm.
more connected to the experiences that you had. And in your book, Hollow, you share your personal story. You talk
Yes.
about how you battled depression,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, eating disorders, and you were vulnerable enough to share some of the addictions that you had to
Mm-hmm.
opioids, alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and and how you cope with losing the things that were most important to you.
Yeah.
If you can share a little bit about, as you made a decision to really write the book, but when you were thinking back on what it meant for you to feel hollow, what was that feeling like?
Yeah, so that's so interesting that you start with that, because I was trying to, when I thought about writing a book, first of all, Hollow, the book, is my journal. And it chronicles 18 months of some trauma and tragedy that I went through. And I was never like a journaler or anything. I never just like wrote my thoughts down. But as I got older, I found that was a coping mechanism that really kind of helped. So I just picked up pen and paper and in the book, and I just started writing stuff down that just try to soothe my own soul. And so never knew that it would turn out to be a book. But when I started writing the book, I wanted to be able to, I'm a visual person because I do graphics and arts and things like that. So I'm very visual. And I wanted to really help the reader, paint a picture for the reader to understand what I felt like. And so as a child, I got a chocolate Easter bunny every year, and it was always hollow on the inside. And so that was one of the things that made me think of, okay, I'm going to name the book Hollow, because the first thing I remembered was being sucked through a straw by that bunny that was
Mm.
so beautiful on the outside, but very empty on the inside. And so that's the introduction of the book, is called The Chocolate Easter Bunny. And so my dad was a truck driver, and he worked for a company called Diamond Paper Box Company, and he hauled a bunch of stuff all the time. And so every year we were guaranteed to get that chocolate Easter bunny. He would come home with those baskets and stuff. And so I'm the youngest of 7 children. And so my father was a truck driver, my mother was a homemaker. So we didn't get a whole bunch of sweets and a bunch of candy, and we couldn't really afford a lot. I mean, I didn't know I was poor, but I was poor.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were rich with family, with, having your family. And sometimes you don't know that you're poor. You don't know that, eating cereal at night was cool, because you just thought it was cool. That
Yeah.
wasn't uncool. So my dad brought these chocolate Easter bunnies home. And I remember, eating this bunny and, just saying, this thing is, it's shocking. Like, it's all pretty on the outside and then it's empty on the inside.
Mm.
And so to savor it, to try to make it last as pretty and as gorgeous and pretty as long as it could, I was strategic. I didn't know then, but I was strategic at how I ate it. So I would eat the ears, and then I would maybe eat the
Mm.
foot, and then I would eat the tail. But eventually, when you got to the center, the core, the essence of its being, it would crumple. And so when I was starting to write the book, I said, I have to be able to share that, because with each event that took place in my life over that 18 months, I felt like life was eating pieces of me, eating the ears, eating the tail, eating the feet. And then when it got to the center, the core, the essence of my being, it actually crumbled. And so that's when I really fell apart was, who wants to put a broken bunny back in their basket, right?
Mm,
Like, you lose interest in it. And I felt like people, friends, family, life lost interest in me. And so with them losing interest in me, I lost interest in myself. And
wow.
so I started this spiral downward to just trying to cope.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're sharing this, I think a lot of people can resonate with what they're hearing you say.
Mhm.
Looking good on the outside, but
Yes.
feeling empty on the inside.
Yes.
What were some of the things that was going on in your life or that you were experiencing through life that had you looking good on the outside, but yet feeling empty?
Yeah, so a lot of the times, we as women, we fix our hair and we put on our makeup, but most of the times, we're dealing internally with some issues that, whether it's over being overweight or not feeling good enough. So we put on more hair, we put on more makeup, we hide
Mhm.
behind this mask. And so I was married twice. I've been married twice. My
Mhm.
first husband was very abusive, physically abusive to me. And I remember asking him, why would you, when he would physically fight me, like, why would you hit me in my face all the time?
Mm,
Like he would like wanted to just like destroy my looks almost. And he
mm,
said, so if I can't have you, no one else would want you. And so that made me feel really kind of like, oh my God. So he wants to destroy my appearance so that nobody else would want me, even if he doesn't want me.
mm,
And so when that marriage dissolved in a divorce several years later, I met another person who was at that time was 13 years older than me. And I'm like, okay, now I got it right. He's a
mm.
professional. He's
Yeah.
13 years older than me. He's an architect. I'm going to have this great life, la, 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 not knowing that I was that movie Sleeping with the Enemy, that I was,
Mm,
moving in and living with a person who was sleeping with the enemy. And I had a son by each one of those husbands. And so, to the point where in my pantry, my cans had to be labeled and faced. It was weird. It was weird. It was very abusive, a very controlling relationship. So in both situations, I lost my self-esteem. Like I lost who I was in that relationship, in both relationships. One was physical and one was verbal. And I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say the verbal was worse than the physical because it seemed like the physical you could like I remember getting hit in my head, my face, my nose, and I fell on the ground and I hit a rock and my head was cut over my eye, but it healed. I mean, it healed. My nose was messed up, but I got that. I mean, everything was fixed.
yeah.
It was healed, but it was the words from the verbal abuse that seemed to stay and linger longer. Those were hard, that you're not any good. You've gained weight. I didn't marry a fat woman. I'm not going to have a fat wife. You got to get that baby weight off of you. What are you eating? Why are you eating that? And I don't know. I felt like, my self-worth at that point, was just really making me feel just very empty, with all of those words. It seems like those words you can always hear them, even though the scar will heal and you may still have a visual, something that says, oh, I remember when I burnt myself, it doesn't hurt anymore. But the
Mm,
words seem to hurt all the time, and the words will come back up in my future. So I dated a guy who would say, I don't want you to eat this. I want you to look this way. They wanted me to look like this chocolate Easter bunny. And
mm,
it was just like, I couldn't keep up with that. So it just seemed like those words stayed longer. And so they would resurface themselves in other relationships. And so I realized that, and I teach this to people when I talk and I go out and I speak about the book and things, that you have to look beyond the surface of what you're going through to identify the things that have gotten you there. So if you don't go deep, deep inside of you to figure out what it is that is making you empty, you're gonna repeat it over and over. And so, I'm coming out of one verbal relationship, going into another, picking another person that was, because I didn't have my own self-esteem. I didn't have any self-worth. And it wasn't until being in this relationship after my marriage where I said to my then boyfriend of 8 years, why would I be in a relationship for
Mhm.
8 years? Right. Okay. I'm just going to be real. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm like, when he was having affairs and stuff like that, it's like, why do you treat me this way? He said, I don't treat you anyway. You treat yourself that way.
Hmm.
And I said, well, you just walk all over me. He said, I couldn't walk over you unless you laid down. Well, then the light bulb came
Wow.
on. It was me. So it was me not dealing with the low self-esteem on the inside, the emptiness, the things that were on the inside of me, and trying to fill those things with the wrong things. So I tried to fill them with food, alcohol, drugs, people, men. I wanted to be loved. I was
Yeah.
empty. And I have to be honest with you, the only thing that really helped me in my restoration was being filled by the love of God,
Hmm.
period.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So when we think about the challenges that we experience in life, I think we all have experienced grief in some capacity.
Mhm.
But oftentimes, when we're in it, it's hard to allow ourselves to cope
Yep.
in healthy ways. It's hard to allow ourselves to grieve what we have lost. And you talk about, being in one relationship and that ending,
Mhm.
right? There's a period of that relationship ending where there's grief, right?
Yes.
Whether you wanted the relationship to work out or not, just the fact that you were in that relationship, there's grief. So I'm curious to know, now that you are on the outside of where you once were,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that either would have been helpful for you to grieve what you experienced versus you jumping into the next thing, jumping
Yeah.
into the next relationship, doing whatever it is that you could to run from it? Because I think a lot of people struggle with being able to grieve,
Mhm.
to sit there long enough to experience the emotions, because they're difficult
Mhm.
oftentimes.
Mhm.
But it's in those experiences and us allowing ourselves that opportunity where we learn those lessons and actually, grieve through the process versus
Yes.
taking all of that with us to the next thing. So, what are some things that you can now look back and say, these would have helped me in terms of grieving throughout that process?
Really understanding the grief process, the 5 stages of grief,
Mm,
because I did not understand it, and I did not give myself permission to grieve. And then when I finally just learned how to go through those 5 stages, then I realized that no one should try to rush you through those stages. I was always told,
mm,
you're the youngest, you're the strongest, you can handle this, you can do it. And that is the biggest lie that anybody could tell you. Because if you're telling them that you're not doing well with the, grieving process, or you're not handling a situation well, then what we can just do as friends and family is listen. And so, I never felt comfortable with being able to share my really deep, dark secrets with people, because they always, they would not be real with the fact that, or your feelings. They would not handle your feelings well. So it's like, oh,
mhm.
it's okay. You can do it. You can get through it. So I would
Yeah.
say that
Most people are
very
uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
hearing that. They don't
Right.
know what to do with that. They know
They
what
don't
to
know
do
what
with the
to do with
positive
it.
feelings and emotions, and
Hmm.
those things make us feel good. But when it's something negative, right?
Negative.
Not many people are willing to sit
They're
with
not
someone who's
really.
experiencing those.
Exactly. And
Very
so
true.
one thing that I realized is that I had to learn to grieve that. So I never grieved the relationship in between my husbands. I never, because who wants to not be like, I thought I was going to be married forever.
Yeah.
I got married the first time when I was 19 because I was pregnant. And
Mm,
so, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I didn't go to college. And I'm a mother now, and I'm a wife. This whole process. Never thought that I would be in in an abusive relationship and literally having to escape for my life. I literally packed a bag and had a group of people help me get out of Connecticut, escape on a train. It was funny. I should have wrote a book about that, but
Wow.
the great escape. But not funny, but just to be able to strategically, when you've had enough abuse, to strategically be able to do that and run away and get back with my son, who was then like 2 years old. And so, but not being able to grieve that situation, even though it was abusive, you still had to have that period. So, but I would think that in each piece, in each relationship ending, I never really grieved the process. It took me way post my mother dying. So that the tragedy that took place that I wrote about is in 18 months. My mother did hospice in my home and she died, and she planned her own funeral, picked out her coffin, picked out what she was going to wear, wrote her own obituary. And I was freaking out because she was
Wow.
my best friend. And so that happened. And then the next year, my nephew died of cirrhosis of the liver at 36. And I was with him when he died in hospice. And then 2 months after that, I took a mentally ill sister that my mother left me with power of attorney. I took her off life support and watched her flatline. So I was done, like with all
And that
my
was
bad
18 months.
18 months, all this happened.
Wow.
18 months. And so with me not having a great track record of grieving and going through not even knowing the 5 steps of grief and knowing how to do that, when this came upon me, it was even worse. And so that's when I started abusing drugs and alcohol and wanted to commit suicide because thought I was being punked. I'm like, this is too much for me to handle. And I wanted to kind of tap out. But it was during that process, after going to therapy, learning about the 5 steps of grief, that before I can get to acceptance of this, that I had to go through the grief, the anger, the denial. I had to go through those processes and that steps. And no one can rush you through that. I had people trying to rush me. Okay, you've grieved enough. Let's move to the next thing. You can get, no, you cannot. And you just have to be patient and caring. And if you can't do it, offer assistance, help that person get to therapy. And so I finally had to go to therapy, and because it was a vicious cycle. And if I didn't go get help, then I would be allowing people to physically, mentally abuse me, socially abuse me. I just wouldn't have learned the lesson. And so grieving, you got to do it. You got to go through the 5 steps, Abraham. You have to do it.
Yeah, and those steps, for those of you who are listening, I definitely encourage you to Google it. Do your research and identify what those steps and stages are. The first is denial.
Yeah.
And then there's anger, and then there's bargaining, trying to bargain, and then depression and acceptance. And I think when we look at the stages from an objective perspective, it now gives us permission to say, wow.
Yeah.
So it's not this, incident that happens and the next day or next week I'm back to things as usual, but it's an actual process. There's stages that happen. Just like, I'm 26 years old. I'm going to be 27 November 29th. And it took me 26 years to become 26 years old. And oftentimes we lose things in our lives, and we want that turnaround time, that lag time, to be immediate without recognizing we lost something. And I think the other thing to understand is we can't minimize loss or grief, because it can look different for every single person. The fact that so many, we work with a lot of young adults, a lot of students throughout the country, and there were a lot of students who went from being in a traditional classroom to having to take classes online. They went from being on a college campus to going back to their homes where they didn't feel safe. It was a toxic environment, and they were forced to be in that position because of what we were all experiencing with COVID. And that can be loss for many people. And so just recognizing that loss looks different, right? And we all
Yes.
need to grieve, I think, is critically important.
Yeah, that is a great point, because when I got to the anger stage of the 5 stages, I was angry at everybody, because I took care of my mom alone, and I had siblings that would call and say, "Well, how's mom today?" And it's like, well, she's doing the same and she's not getting any better, and I need a break. I was caregiving. And so I had family members that lived in the same subdivision and then 1 block away, or 2 blocks, so 2 miles away, but nobody gave me the help. And I was super angry about that. It's like, don't call me and ask how she's doing. Come see your mom. Like, come
Mhm.
see her. Like, you drive by my house every day. Like, come see her. And let's all work together and caregive her, because she's not just my mom, she's all of our moms. And so I was so angry. I was angry at God because my mom was my best friend, and I'm like losing her. She's gone. And then my nephew died. And then my mom leaves me my mentally ill sister to be power of attorney over it, and she dies.
Mm.
And so I'm like angry. I'm so angry. I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at the abuse that I've allowed. I'm furious. And I was mad at a lot of people. And one of the things that God had to say to me was, Lynette, one doesn't grieve like you grieve. And because they're not grieving the way you're grieving doesn't mean that they're not grieving.
Mm.
And it just had to help me like, oh, you know what? You're right. Everyone grieves in their own way. So somebody might go exercise because that's their way of grieving. Someone may eat so much. Someone might smoke or drink or do whatever. They just go through their processes differently. It doesn't mean that they're not grieving. And so it really helped me to have more compassion with my siblings, my family members, that I felt like, y'all left me holding the bag here. And I'm a single parent and I don't have a 2 income. I had to take off work. I had to leave work for 30 days. And I was grateful that I had a boss that said, take care, we can go through short-term disability, you can go do what you have to do, don't worry, your job will be safe. But I was worried about all of those things on top of everything. So we have to just know that everybody doesn't grieve the same way that you grieve.
Mhm.
And just be sensitive to the fact that they may be grieving as well.
Yeah, you shared, a lot of what happened during that 18-month period, and I can't even imagine experiencing all of that, and it almost seemed like it was back to back to
Yeah.
back to back. There are some people who are listening,
Hmm.
and they are in situations where they have lost people that they love.
Hmm.
They have lost their job,
Hmm.
their means of providing financially, either for their families or for themselves. They've lost opportunities, they've lost their freedom in many cases. And similar to what it felt like for you, for many, it feels like it's back to back to back to back. And you also shared how you were able to find that source of support through your relationship with God.
Hmm.
What encouragement would you share with anyone who is experiencing that loss, and is feeling like they are completely alone? How do they find a source of support? How do they identify safe people who they can share with so that they don't feel alone? Or what are some ways that they can express themselves versus suppress and stay in that isolated state?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I had known this a little bit earlier, but I know it now. So, but first and foremost, know that you're not alone.
Mm.
It feels like you're alone, but you're really not alone. There are so many resources. There are more resources now to help us than there were when I wrote the book. So my mom died in 2005. I wrote the book in 2011. It's
Mm.
2022, about to be 2023. So, back then we were not talking about mental health. We weren't talking about depression and anxiety. Matter of fact, it was very taboo to say I'm depressed. They may want to take you to a hospital and leave you in the psych ward or something, and oh wow, or and remember the movie Soul Food? I don't know if you remember that movie. I'm a little bit older. I don't know if I'm a little bit older, Avery.
I don't.
But Soul Food, right? There was this guy named Uncle Pete, and they used to like keep Uncle Pete upstairs in the room, like Uncle Pete never came out because he was like the special person, and they would bring him his food and stuff like that. So it's like everybody, instead of you going into an Uncle Pete mode, and me and a friend of mine, we say, no, don't go in Uncle Pete mode. Like instead of going into an Uncle Pete mode where you stay isolated from the family because you don't have the coping skills to kind of handle the things that are happening, or people that are in your family don't understand what you're feeling or what you're going through, just know that you're not alone. There are people like yourself, people like me. There are organizations out here that will help you get the help you need to talk to someone. I just had a good friend of mine who's going through a really bad divorce. And as her friend, she would just call me and tell me about, what's going on. And finally, I said to her, first of all, you're not alone in this situation. You can always call me. But however, I'm going to want you to really go and get some help. And so I made a referral to her. She took the referral, and now she's on the way of getting some therapy because she needed it. She needed it. Like she's gotten to the point where she's sick physically. She's losing hair. It's just stress and anxiety and depression on her so much. So there is help out there. Okay. And give yourself permission to get help. That's a big one, Abraham.
Absolutely.
We don't give ourselves permission.
Talk about it.
To get help. Like I can't help myself. No, give yourself permission to get some help. Go easy on yourself. Like it's okay. I heard a song not long ago that says, if I'm being honest, I'm not being honest. I don't want you to see the thorns I give you roses so that you don't see the thorns in my garden. That makes me so emotional when I say that, because I've been there. I've given people the roses out of my garden just so that you don't see the thorns and the erosion in my own garden. I try to give the best of who I am, and you just can't. So you have to be able to give yourself permission to go get some help. And it's okay. Speak up and say, I'm not doing good today. I'm just not doing good. And I'm glad my friend said I'm not doing good. I'm glad that I'm in the position that I'm in to say, go get some help. I want to give you a referral, because if I didn't know this, I would just listen to her and couldn't offer her anything to get better. And as her friend, like I want her to be better. And we don't like broken friends. I remember telling a friend of mine when I was not doing good, I said, I'm just not doing good. And, they said, oh, you'll be all right. Call me when you feel better. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm not doing good. So I'm telling you that. So if you have a friend that's telling you they're not doing good, and you don't know what to say, send them, refer them to professionals who know how to look beyond the surface of what they're going through to identify the things that are making them feel the way they are feeling.
Yeah, you did. And that's so good. I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is self-compassion. I think oftentimes we can be so hard on ourselves, and we're not that way with our best friends. We're not that way with our family members and the ones that we love. But oftentimes we give ourselves the approach of, you're not supposed to feel this way.
You can't beat me harder than I can beat myself. I will whip the daylights out of myself.
It's so true. It's so true. But when we allow ourselves that compassion to say, I get a chance to feel, right? I remember I was in a therapy session once, and prior to being exposed to what is called a feelings wheel, I had
Mm.
no idea that there were feelings outside of being happy and mad. That's
Mm.
all I knew.
Okay.
Right. And my therapist introduced me to this feelings wheel, and there were feelings on this, like feeling betrayed, feeling
Mm.
hurt, feeling anxious. There
Mm.
were so many feelings that I was not able to articulate prior to being exposed to it. And so because I couldn't articulate, I didn't know it existed. I never allowed myself to feel these things.
Okay.
But we as human beings, we have so many emotions, so many feelings, but oftentimes we don't allow ourselves to feel that. So I think, in what you're sharing and, reaching out to someone and finding someone that we can be, open with, also having that compassion with ourselves to say, I get to feel
Yes.
this.
I
Right.
get to feel it. And I
Yeah.
stopped allowing other people to tell me what I don't feel.
Mm,
That was huge to me. Like that was a serious aha moment. And when I started arresting that, no, 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 you don't get to tell me how I feel. I'm telling you how you feel. You ever had a person say to you, "Oh, you don't feel that way"?
yep.
It's so disrespectful. It's like I'm telling you how you gonna tell me how I feel? Like I'm telling you how I feel today, and you're gonna tell me I don't feel this way. Respect a person when they're saying that to you, they are feeling a certain way, and help direct them to get the help that they need. Because if first of all, you know yourself, Abraham, we ain't gonna tell nobody that what we going through.
Yeah.
We ain't gonna talk about it. We're gonna try to process it ourselves. We're gonna try to understand it. But if we finally eventually say something to someone else, we're kind of at that desperate point.
Mm,
I spoke about this because I was afraid of myself. I lived in Florida and I was contemplating, how do I kill myself? Like,
mm,
do I just put a rock on my ankle and jump in my pool and just sink into 6 feet?
mm,
But then I did not want my son to come home around the corner and look in the backyard and see me floating. So I decided not to do that time. But it was like, and I'm like, that scared me. Like those suicide thoughts, they frightened me. So I'm like, I need to speak up. And so when you finally get to a point where you speak up, we're searching. I think it was you who told me that a person that contemplates suicide really don't want to die.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was you and
Right.
I that had that conversation. And I
Yeah.
was like, you're right.
Yeah. So I wrote in my book, someone who is considering suicide, they don't want to die. They want to end the pain.
They want to end the
And
pain.
and the only way to end the pain in their minds is to end their life.
Yes.
And that's a reality for many people who are experiencing pain and experiencing grief, experiencing loss. They're thinking about, well, I've tried drinking, I've tried, smoking, I've tried all these different
Mhm.
ways of coping, and yet I'm still experiencing
Still
this
got the
pain. So
pain.
suicide must be the only option
Only
to
option.
to end the pain. And for those who are listening and may feel that way or know someone who feels that way, I always like to share this resource. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is now 988. So
Mm.
anyone can call or text 988 and get immediate support 24/7. It's confidential and it's free. And just like Lynette is sharing with us on the show, we got to reach out.
Mhm.
And when you're at a point where you can no longer keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
And I advise people, don't wait until that moment. But if you're in
Yes.
that moment, reach out. There's always support, and there's always someone who can guide you throughout that process. So,
And Abraham, just real quick on the other side of that, reaching out, when a person does reach out to you, when they reach out to you, do not discount their feelings. Listen, and then if you cannot help them, then direct them to the place that they can,
mhm,
but the worst thing that we can do is discount a person's feelings. And we may have some, holidays always brings it out. The holidays is
mhm,
coming, and the
mhm,
holidays will bring out a variety of things. Death always brings out, controversy. That brings out, conflict, if you will. And
mhm,
so people breaking down and, well, you always talk to me this way, or you never, listen, be compassionate and listen, and direct. So listen and direct them to hotlines, to resources, to get them. And don't use words like crazy.
Mm,
Like, oh, she just crazy.
yeah.
Okay, don't use those kind of words because they are difficult for people. That makes them go like, well, I'm not gonna tell you my feelings anymore, or I'm not gonna tell you because all you're gonna do is make fun of me. So I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, I just wanted to interject that as
Yes,
well.
that's so good. And one thing that jumps out as well for me, you're talking about listening. And I think it's so important to listen to understand.
Yes.
Oftentimes, I know for me personally, I struggle with wanting to fix it, wanting to have the right words to say, wanting to have that solution. But so many people just need you to listen to understand what they're experiencing. And one of the greatest, I think, you know, one of the powerful tools that we can utilize as well as being able to validate someone's
Yes.
experience. if
Yes.
if you, Lynette, share something with me, and let's say I don't necessarily resonate with what you're sharing, me validating your experience could be something, like, I'm sorry you're going through that, or that
Mm-hmm.
sounds tough.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense why you're feeling this way,
Yes.
versus minimizing your feeling, or telling you shouldn't feel that way, like you mentioned earlier. And I think when we can validate someone's experience, whether we understand it, feel it or not, that
Yeah.
lets that person know that they're seen, they're heard,
Yeah.
right? And they can trust us to
I
continue to
found out
share.
something talking about difficult things like this is that I'm helping people understand this three process: feel, felt, and found.
Hmm,
So you say, I understand how you're feeling. I have found this to happen to me at one point. And then, so you have feel, you have felt, and then you have found. I have found that this happens, or this helps in crisis and things like that. So if we think about feel, felt, and
that's
found,
good.
when you're talking to a person and when they come to you, you listen. And then if you have to respond and you don't know, you can just say, I understand how you feel. I have found it happening that way to me, and I have been in those situations, and so you be able to kind of, direct them to the right way of feeling, felt, you felt it, and then this is what you have found, directing them to, a hotline. I have
Mm,
found that this works well, or I've heard that this has worked well, or here's a great resource. You help them find the solution to where they need to
that's
go.
so good. That's so good. And as we're getting close to wrapping up the episode, there, like I mentioned, there's so many people going through grief during the holidays,
Yeah.
and the holidays look different. It used to be where grandma was around the
Yep.
dinner table, auntie was around the dinner table, mom or dad used to be together, but now, and so it's being able to process that life looks differently now, and
Mhm.
it's okay for me to feel these feelings and grieve through this process
Yeah.
during the holidays. I think sometimes the expectation is, it's the holidays, you're supposed to be happy. It's the
Yeah.
holidays, you're supposed to be joyful. You're supposed to, right? But that's not the experience for so many people. So I'd love for us to share. I have a few things that people can, take with them in terms of coping with grief through the
Yeah.
holidays. And then if you have anything to share with these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The first thing is to really set realistic expectations for yourself.
Yeah.
What will the holidays look like for you this year?
Mhm.
Right. And setting that realistic expectation to say, well, these are things that I can commit to, and these are things that I can't commit to. These are things that
That's good.
I have the capacity to do, and these are the things that I currently don't have the capacity to do. And setting those expectations prior to getting in that position where
Mhm.
you have to show up as you always have. So any thoughts on that?
This podcast is powered by Speaks to Inspire, the mental health solution for young adults suffering in silence. Did you know that students who experience shame and hold negative perceptions about mental health conditions are less likely to reach out for help? By marrying the art of storytelling with mental health education, Speaks to Inspire is creating safe spaces through comprehensive, high-impact programs that help colleges, universities, and schools increase engagement and retention. Learn how you can bring a Speaks to Inspire speaker to your campus by visiting www.speakstoinspire.com/speakers.
Yeah, I just want to say too that, you are going to be this Thursday coming up. You're going to sit at the table and there's going to be a chair that's going to be empty from someone, grandmama, brother, sister, cousin, husband, wife, niece, child. Somebody's going to be missing. Give yourself permission to grieve through that process. This may be the very first holiday that you have that without that person. Give yourself together as a family an opportunity to grieve. But here's one of the greatest things. Remember all of the beautiful things. Cook their favorite meal. Cook grandma's green bean casserole and try it. I know I still haven't got my mom's biscuits down, but I'm going to keep trying. But think about all those things that make you laugh. And those things that they have said and those things that they have done. That's how I get through my grief now. And that's how, because I grieve my mother twice a year. Okay. Really more, but two times really affect me. December 1st, because that's the day she died. And December 16th, that's the day that she was born. And she was my absolute best friend. And so those days are hard for me. And I find that when those come up, I feel myself having those feelings. But then I started thinking about when I'm busy and I rest my lips like this, that's her. That's her coming through me saying, I'm with you. Because sometimes I catch myself and I'm like, oh my God, I got the mommy lips going on. She ain't like this. And I'm like, got my lips pouted out. And when I make her sweet potato pies or when I make the mac and cheese recipe, which I tried to revamp the other day and it came out horrible. And I tested it and she said, don't mess with my recipe. Fix it the way it's supposed to be. So think about those things that make you laugh with that person and you will feel them. Even though their body is not physically there, you will feel their spirit super, super strong. And just love on each other because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. There's somebody told me there was over 4,000 promises in the Bible, but tomorrow's not one of them.
Wow.
So live each day as it's your last.
I love it. I love it. I think it's so important, especially experiencing grief and loss, to create those new traditions.
Yeah.
Like create new things, right? And
with that person in mind.
Yeah. In remembrance and honor of that person that you love and that you've lost. And
set the table anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And the last thing that I would share just in terms of coping is, and we've talked about it throughout the episode, is taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Right. Taking care of yourself and honoring what it is that you need during the holiday season.
Yeah.
Do you need a break from social media?
Yeah.
Do you need to take a break from the outside noise? Do you need to cry?
Yeah.
Do you need to express your emotions in ways that you've been suppressing them for too long? Like,
do you need to take a bath?
Do you need to take a bath? Take a walk? Whatever that looks like for you, and taking care of yourself.
I know. I took a bath in the middle of the day one day. This was weird. I was working and grinding and I had a break and I was like, oh my God, should I go to the gym? Should I go to the pool? Should I go take a walk? And something said, take a bath.
Yeah.
I took a bath in the middle of the day. I'm like, I'm going to go take a bath. I ran myself a bath water and I put my little phone in there. I watched HBO and I sat down and I had lots of stuff. It was great. So take a bath. And I said to myself, I need to take more baths because I take showers, but I need to take more baths. It relaxed my mind and I was able to get back up and just come back to work and be like, oh yeah. Okay, and that's what I needed to do. So take a bath.
I love it. I love it. We need more baths.
We need more baths.
That's so good. That's so good. My final question, Lynette, I want to end with this question. And I like to ask the guests the same question just to hear the way you view it. What is mental health to you?
Love, self-love. Being able to love myself. I find that when I don't love myself and take care of myself, the files are on top of the file cabinet and they're not filed in their proper place. And so good mental health is self-care for me because I can't pour out of an empty cup. And a lot of times other people may not say it, but they can hear you scraping the pot, trying to get the last bit of something out of that pot. And there's nothing there. And I've scraped my own pot sometimes trying to give. You can't pour out of an empty spirit, out of an empty cup, out of an empty body, out of an empty mind. And so self-care, being able to pour back in myself, to have time that I can think about things, that I can train and learn and do things, take care of myself, take those baths. That's what good mental health means for me. And since I've been practicing good mental health, it is really, really helped me. And listen, one last thing, sitting on the couch if I have to, meaning going to see a therapist. I'm not afraid of that. Matter of fact, I used to love my couch time, so I think I need to go back.
I actually recently got back into therapy. It's been extremely
It's so good, isn't it?
Yeah, so helpful. I can't speak any more highly of finding, good therapists and developing that relationship, because it's important. It's important.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that, Lynette. And just a few things for those who are listening. Please do me a favor and go out and get a copy of Hollow, Lynette's book, Hollow.
I have a copy right here.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like.
Yes, Hollow. When everything that means anything is taken away. And I think, you've been able to hear bits and pieces of Lynette's story, but being able to dive in, I think will really be helpful for you. And there are things that you can resonate with and grow from through listening to Lynette's story. Another thing is, I mentioned Lynette is one of our speakers at Speaks to Inspire. We'd love to have Lynette to come out and speak. You can go to speakstoinspire.com and learn more about that story there and ways that she can inspire your organization, your students, your group. A few other resources for those who are listening. I mentioned earlier, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is now 988. So for 24/7 chat and phone support with a crisis counselor, it's totally free. You can call or text 988.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and get that support immediately. I think some people, at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., they don't have that best friend that's up at that time. And reaching out to 988, they can get that support when they need it. We also do blog posts. So we have a blog on seasonal depression and how to cope. So if you go to speakstoinspire.com/blog, you can check that blog out and other blogs that we are releasing monthly. We also have the Unrealized Facebook group. So if you'd like to continue this conversation and to connect with other mental health advocates and build those relationships and find ways that we can ultimately eradicate the stigma of mental health, join the group just by searching Unlearn the Lies About Mental Health on Facebook, and we'll be happy to have you in there. So again, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Lynette, if you can just share, what is one place that our listeners can go to find you and connect with you on social media?
Yes. So I think the coolest thing is that my podcast I have out, it goes live on Tuesdays on Facebook. They can just Google Lynette Jackson on Facebook, or they can go to Roar the Group on Facebook, YouTube, Roar Media Group, and you'll see Speak Out Loud podcast. We air every Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Live. And yes, you've been on that podcast.
I have. And it was an amazing conversation.
It was so good.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And we'll be sure to put all of those links in the show notes so that you can access that and connect with Lynette outside of this conversation. So again, thank you for joining this podcast, and y'all take care.